Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7 p.m. Let me call to order the October 6, 2015 meeting of the Merrimack Planning Board. Let me remind everyone who will address the board to please sign in and make sure the microphone's turned on and speak clearly into it so the folks at home can hear you. Our next planning board meeting after tonight will be October 20th at 7 p.m. in the Matthew Thornton room, which is this room. Let me appoint, looks like Nelson's been more than Jeff. Jeff to sit and vote for Mike tonight.
Okay.
We're leaving him up. And with that, Tim, Planning and Zoning Administrator's report.
Before I get to the regional impact determination memo, just wanted to quickly welcome Vincent Russo, our new full member of the Planning Board, who was appointed by the Town Council back on September 10th, and just wanted to say welcome and look forward to working with him.
Thank you for saying so, and welcome, Vincent. And I know a little bit about you, but I don't know if all the other planning board members do. I won't put you on the spot and make you sort of do an introduction, but if you get a chance to tell everybody about you, I think you got a great background and you're going to be a valued member of the board. So,
I'll make sure your microphone's on, please.
Yes.
Something new. Okay. I lived in Hudson for about 25 years, and for the past 10, 11 years, I was involved in the planning board there. Was chairman for 4 years, the last 4 years, and then moved to Merrimack and just kind of got myself situated and decided that I'd like to help you guys out and try to give my input and see where things go.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Tim, what else you got for us tonight?
In your packets, you should have a memo from me dated September 30th for regional impact determinations for 3 of the projects that are on tonight's agenda. The Crosswoods Path site plan, the Gackus and Domian subdivisions. Based on the criteria from the discussion we had back last December, staff recommendation is that we determine that these are not of regional impact as they don't meet the criteria for a regional impact determination.
Is there any discussion by members of the board? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Yeah, I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
I think Lynn beat you.
Oh,
We'll go
I'll
with Lynn
shut
as
up
the
then.
second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 601 with Vincent Russo abstaining for that. So that motion passes. Tim, anything else for us?
We are still awaiting final approval from driving records from the state. Hopefully we'll be having a new assistant planner starting soon. I've made the decision almost a month ago. We're just working through the various HR procedures, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to introduce our new assistant planner hopefully next month.
Congratulations on that. I hope the individual doesn't starve to death or find himself impoverished while he's unemployed waiting for this process to play out. It's hard to survive a month waiting with no income.
I think he's still working at his current job until such time he gets the final offer.
Sounds good. Any questions by members of the board for the staff on this or any other subject? Nelson?
Just one question. Tim is taking minutes tonight. I see Zion is absent.
I am not taking the minutes. Dawn McMillan, who's our backup secretary who does the Town Council and Conservation Commission, will be taking the DVD from tonight's meeting and doing the minutes. So she's done that previously. She does actually all of her minutes from DVD and audio, so she's very good at it, and I have no real concerns. It's just a reminder to Bob to announce the motions and who makes the motions in the second, so just makes it a little bit easier for her as she does that.
Thank you for the reminder and the clarification to do that, and also for folks that come in to introduce themselves. And if your name is particularly lengthy or anything complicated, go ahead and spell it for the record, but the sign-in sheet should cover that as well. Anything else by members of the board for staff? Seeing none, that moves us on to item number 3 on our agenda, which is Robert Lavoie as the applicant and Greg R. Kennedy as the owner. It's a review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of an application for a 2-lot minor subdivision. The parcel is located at 8 Fuller Mill Road in the R1 residential district by zoning map. Tax map 4B, lot 153, and the agenda item is continued from our June 16th and July 7th and August 4th planning board meetings. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
This project, well, it has been continued on 3 separate occasions. This is actually the first time the applicant is here to present the project. This proposed subdivision did have to go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, received 4 variances, 3 for the new lot, 1 for the parent lot, those being to allow the new lot to have less than the required frontage lot size and lot depth, and to allow the parent lot to have less than the required lot depth. When this lot was originally subdivided back in the late 90s, it was prior to the town adopting the R1 residential zoning district by map. So at the time, it was allowed to be subdivided using the soil-based lot standards. Now that this lot is in the R1 district, it requires 100,000 square feet, 250 feet of frontage, and 300 feet of lot depth. They were unable to do so, so they were successful in getting the variances. So the applicant is here tonight requesting the conditional final approval for the project, minor two-lot subdivision, and I'm sure there's discussion we'll have regarding that after the presentation.
Thank you, Tim. Is the applicant here? Please come forward. Take a minute to settle in and get set up, and then sign in, introduce yourself. The best place to put one of those is on this side for the benefit of the camera and the board members. Is it a little too close, or back a little bit for you, Tim? I can see. I don't think so. Okay. There. That looks good.
Yeah, make sure the mic is on.
How's that?
Better.
I'm Dan Higginson with Meridian Land Services, here on behalf of Robert Lavoie and Greg Kennedy. That was a great introduction summary to the project. Given the simplicity of the two-lot subdivision, I don't have a lot to add to it. The planning board memo stated that there is some structures existing in the front setback of the proposed lot. All of those are to be raised, so there won't be any setback issues there. The memo also says that state subdivision shall be obtained. It's been applied for, it's pending. There's several miscellaneous drafting items that are being taken care of. And there was a note about a sidewalk waiver, which I've prepared and I have a copy of for you tonight.
Okay.
Other than that, there's not a lot to add to it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay. What's the will of the board with respect to determining the application complete?
Also move.
I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Christensen, seconded by Ms. Fault. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? 601 with Mr. Russo abstaining to accept the application as complete. If you'd like to explain the sidewalk waiver that you've requested, or you're going to request, now's a good time to do that.
Before we get into that, because this is a minor subdivision, the board can determine that it's not necessary based on the requirements of the regulation, so it's the board's option whether or not you determine a sidewalk waiver is even required.
Okay. Thanks, Tim, for that. I think either way, the information that you have to share will be valuable
Sure.
to us in making either one of those determinations. So let's go down that road a little bit.
Basically, Fuller Mill Road's not listed as a collector or arterial street. Due to the fact there's no sidewalks in near proximity to the property, we feel that strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and the waiver would not be contrary to the spirit of the regulations.
Okay. And then alternatively, we could decide as a minor subdivision that it isn't even necessary to have a waiver. What's the will of the board? Is there discussion on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the waiver that as proposed by Mr. Higginson for eliminating the need of sidewalks on the basis that as he so eloquently put it, that the strict conformity would, relative to the subdivision, in the waiver will carry out the spirit and intent of the regulations.
Is there a second for Mr. Mills? Lynn?
I'll second, and I have a question.
Okay, seconded by Lynn, and discussion.
What's the effect of whether we grant a sidewalk waiver or whether we determine there isn't one needed?
The effect is essentially the same. Because you have the ability to determine that the waiver is not needed. If for whatever reason he couldn't make a case that it met the requirements statutorily for granting a waiver, it gives the board an out.
So down the road, there's no difference?
No, there's no difference either way.
I'm fine.
How
My
about recording, a question, how about recording it? If we provide a variance, it gets recorded.
Oh, we don't do variances, but that's the zoning board, a waiver.
Yeah, a waiver, sorry. If we grant a waiver, it goes into the documentation.
It will have to be noted on the plan that would be recorded at the registry. Yes.
Okay, but if we decide it's not required,
Then it would not be on the plan.
But it would be recorded in our minutes that was the
Oh, okay.
determination that we made. When we do these two lots or minor subdivisions, we've written into our ordinance that we can, on the basis of that, set aside any of our subdivision regulations as being unnecessary without necessarily tying it to one of the statutory criteria. So it's really something that we're able to do only in the context of a minor subdivision. And so that's what creates this opportunity to do something a little bit different.
In many cases with a minor subdivision where you have a large parent lot that has a lot of topography that needs to be mapped, you have the ability to basically wait to determine it's not necessary to delineate, all the topography, the wetlands, or anything on the lot that's not being impacted, as long as you have sufficient information to make an informed decision.
Lynn?
I'm going to vote against the motion. I think I would rather determine that this is not necessary.
So in terms of once we vote on the motion, which is on the table, which is to grant the variance, if that doesn't pass, then you'd have an alternative motion.
Right.
I'm sorry. Yes, now I'm misspeaking. I'm sorry. The motion on the table is for a motion on the floor is for a waiver of the sidewalk requirement. Any other discussion of that item? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 1, 2, 3 opposed. Any abstaining? Okay, so I'll lose count. 3,
For Tom.
2, 4, 1. You got all the names for the minutes? I'm to read all these out.
The two were Bob and Alistair.
2 in favor of Bob and Alistair, and abstaining was Vincent. Okay, so that motion fails. Is there another motion?
I'll make a motion that we do not need to consider this as a waiver.
Okay, motion that the sidewalk application is not applicable. Second by Ms. Fault. Any other discussion of that? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-1 with Mr. Russo abstaining. 5-1.
No,
I'm sorry, who voted opposed?
Mr.
Me.
Milnes voted
Oh,
against.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Don't worry about it.
He's changing his mind.
No, I'm not.
Nice, consistent.
Remarkably, this isn't my first time. Hard to tell. I can tell that. Okay, so that resolves the issue of the sidewalks. I want to open it up for some public testimony, Tim. Is that right? Public testimony. Any abutters or citizens wish to weigh in? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion by the board? Nelson?
Just a question, Mr. Chairman. I didn't quite hear what the applicant said regarding the existing buildings that are within the setback. Did you say there was?
They're going to be removed.
Okay. The plan says the barn to be.
Raised.
And, okay, and that will be corrected, I presume, as
Yes.
part of the plan if it's approved. Okay, that's all I wanted to clarify.
Mr. Chairman, given the unusual shape of these lots, I'm concerned that there might be an enthusiasm from anybody who might own the lots to try and get an access onto Amherst Road. I feel that has got to be spelt out in the plans that that is not going to be allowed.
Perfectly fine with me.
Okay, so there'll be a note to indicate that these lots are to be accessed as far as the driveway from Fuller Mill Road only.
Correct,
Or
Mr. Chairman.
something
I'd like
along
to
those
add
lines.
that as item. You got it?
Tim's got it. Any other discussion?
One more question.
Jeff?
Have you given any thought to what the access roads will be on these two properties? No thought's been given to it.
Where
on
the
the-
driveways will be?
From Fuller Mill Road,
Where the driveways will be?
yes.
It's a relatively flat road with good sight distance. We haven't pinned down an exact point, but it seemed like a kind of a moot point.
Tom?
Yeah, there's a query here from the staff in D, small d, about what is to happen to the concrete slab.
Turn your microphone on, please.
Apologies. There's a query in here from the staff as to what is to happen to the concrete, with the concrete slab.
That will be removed as well.
Thank you.
Other items of discussion? Is the Desiree?
I just to the effect, because it's a reduced size lot for that front lot, the soil drainage on it, is it going to be adequate for?
It is.
septic?
We did
Yeah.
test pits on the lot, and
Okay.
it's adequate. Meets the town and state criteria.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Desiree. Any other comments or questions? Is the board prepared to take final action?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we grant final approval of this application to subdivide the lot as suggested by the documents provided by Mr. Thompson and the presentation by Mr. Higginson.
In the condition that
With
it
the
is-
On the
addition-
additional conditions, that the memo that Mr. Thompson put together, plus my one additional requirement.
Jeff,
I'm sorry.
were you looking to second the motion? No.
Yes, I will second the motion. Actually, I was doing something else, but I'm just second.
Lynn's my spotter over here, so she spotted you, and you're
I was
right.
sort of thinking.
Getting in training.
so reluctantly seconded by Jeff Sebring.
No, not reluctantly.
No, I was someplace
Hesitantly.
else.
No, not hesitant, no hesitation.
Any other discussion? All in favor of granting final approval, subject to conditions in the memo and those added here tonight, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 601 for final approval. Thank you for coming in. You're all set. All right. Item number 4 on our agenda tonight is Crosswoods Path 3 LLC as the applicant and owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of an application for a waiver of full site plan review for a conversion of an approximately 20,000 square foot office building to up to 21 units of multifamily residential dwelling units within the C2 General Commercial and PUD Overlay and Aquifer Conservation Districts. The parcel is located at 1 Crosswoods Path Boulevard, tax map 7E, lot 46-53. Tim, what do we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
As you remember, Mr. Levin has been before the board twice, once in 2013 and again this past July, to discuss this project in a pre-submission hearing. The board provided him some feedback. In August, he went to the zoning board and was granted the variances needed under Section 15 of the ordinance to allow the 21 units where the density would not otherwise require it. That was granted. So he is here before you tonight for a waiver of full site plan review based on the feedback the board had given to convert the existing commercial office building into those up to 21 units of multifamily.
Thank you, Tim. Please introduce yourself and tell us where we're at with the project.
Yes, I'm Jerry Levin. I live in Nashua, and I own Crosswoods Path. Excuse me, and we're going to convert the property from office use to 21 apartments. I forgot my stand tonight, so I borrowed your stand. Sorry about that. There were a couple of issues that were brought up at the hearing. The first one, I think, is the parking access, the outlet for the cars on Crosswoods Path.
Are you speaking of the hearing before us or for the zoning board?
No, it was. Could have been the zoning board. I can't. Was it the zoning board?
We may well have discussed it. I just want to make the record clear since we're trying to record, and you made a reference to a hearing.
I
wanted
can't
to know which
remember.
one
I've
we're
been
talking
to a lot of hearings.
I think we have discussed that issue, but I just wanted to make sure I knew which meeting, which hearing you were talking
We
about.
submitted an application for a new permit from the highway department, and they have informed us and the town in writing that it's not necessary, and that the information that they had is sufficient, and that the old permit is perfectly valid.
This is for
Okay,
the
so-
NHDOT driveway permit for Crosswoods Path Boulevard. Because that's the only access to the project is through Crosswoods Path. Mr. Levin did contact District 5, and we do have confirmation that he does not need to update the permit.
Okay, so Mr. Levin, you referenced the highway department, but what you meant is DOT?
DOT.
Okay, perfect, because the town
Forgive me.
department is.
Yes, yes, you're right. I don't want to confuse it. The only other issue that at our hearing that we had was the excessive amount of parking, which you all mentioned. And I told you that when I came to this hearing that I would try to indicate to you what we are going to eliminate. And I'm going to go over to the board, if you'll excuse me, and show you the area that we will eliminate on the plan.
Okay.
No problem.
Take that, Mike.
Yeah, either the one on the
Okay.
desk next to you, or you can take that one and walk around the room with it, wherever you want to go.
It's live. Very simply, what we're going to do is we are going to... Is it on?
Yep, you're on.
Okay. I'm going to show you on the picture because I think that's the easiest thing.
Okay.
We're going to eliminate all of this right to here and grass it all in. And it
Okay.
eliminates about 22 to 24 parking spaces. Part of this is going to be a dog run. The rest of it will be grass
Okay.
outside the fence. On this plan, it represents...
So for the record, what you've indicated and pointed to is the parking, that's the northern.
The
The northern edge along Crosswoods
Yes,
Path.
the northern edge along Crosswoods Pass Boulevard.
Boulevard,
Correct. And that will show on the plan when we have the final plan done with
Okay.
the board's requirements.
Do you have a sense of how many square feet of pavement might be removed by doing that?
See if I can give you a quick idea. Looks to be about... See if I can see a dimension here that's worth looking at. I'm going to guess it's probably pretty close to 10,000 feet. Certainly 5 to 6,000 feet anyway. 10.8.
Okay.
My partner, Mr. Bova, has indicated it's 10,800 feet.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just for Jerry's reference, that whatever is left for parking needs to meet the requirement of
50.
It's half a parking space per dwelling unit plus 1.25 per bedroom.
It comes to 58 or 59, and we start out with 90 some odd, so we're still going to have more than we need. But
Okay.
Yeah, we just need to make sure that's noted on the plan.
I got you. Thanks. Tom, were you standing up for a better view, or do you have a question?
Just a better view, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Levin. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about what you got going on?
I don't believe so.
Okay, sounds good. Tim, have we ever accepted this one as complete? Let's manage that bit of business then.
I make a
Desiree.
motion that we accept the application as complete.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Sebring. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 601 with Mr. Russo abstaining. We have any waivers before us other than full site plan review, Tim?
No, we do not.
Okay. What's the will of the board with respect to waiving full site plan review?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we waive a full site plan review on the basis that strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and a waiver is not contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulations.
Is there a second for Mr. Milne's motion? Second by Mr. Sebring. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 601 with Mr. Russo abstaining. Is there any member of the public or abutters who wish to weigh in on this project? Okay. Take a minute to sign in. Come on forward. Take a minute to sign in, and then when you're ready, let us know what's on your mind.
My name is Amy Fuller. I live at the 5 Crosswoods Path Boulevard, which is the next building over.
Can I see it is it in the picture below?
Yes.
Is it visible?
It's this building right here.
Okay, so you live in that building. Okay.
And I just... Sorry, Jerry's running away with me. I had a couple of questions. One
Okay.
is that we received no notification of this hearing.
Okay.
We checked with the management company. The only reason we knew the hearing was happening is that it was in the paper,
Okay.
which is just sort of a business concern for you
No.
to be aware of.
Thank you for that. We'll sort of talk about it in just a second and go over some details. But and you have another concern?
Well, I don't know. Questions.
Questions? Sure.
Just to understand, what is the difference? I heard you say initial final approval in the last one?
Conditional final.
Oh, conditional.
Conditional final approval, which means there's a number of either technical or sometimes substantive requirements that the applicant hasn't yet met that he's required to meet in order to have his plan signed off and ready to have construction. So those things are outlined in a memo that the staff put together dated September 30th, and they includes things like that the plans are signed by the owner, that the applicant will note any waivers, that the applicant submitted the driveway permit. All of those kinds of technical things have to be. And once those conditions are met, then his plan would be signed off, assuming he gets approved here tonight.
Okay.
Thanks.
There was a note, I did download the memo like 10, 20 minutes ago.
Okay.
There was a note about waiving the sidewalk requirement in the memo that it was recommended by the staff.
There would be if he doesn't already have a sidewalk or there isn't one nearby there. So it would normally be part of the procedures as we considered this. And so it'll be part of the discussion in a little bit. When we did the lab,
It's a
though,
determination the board, again, can make because you've waived full site plan review,
Yeah.
whether or not it's necessary to waive that additionally.
okay.
Well, I guess my question would be that with Spartan Pizza right next door and the 7-Eleven just up and across, there's a lot of foot traffic. I mean, enough that there's a crosswalk with a light at the corner at the Society Hill intersection.
Okay.
People walk along there, so having the sidewalk would be, I think, beneficial. A lot of people, walk between the communities, the homeowners association back behind in our association and Society Hill. People walk a lot in between and around there.
I understand. As you get down into Crossroads Path and over by your building, I know that there's some sidewalks kind of integrated in there and
Yes.
don't always go next to the road. They kind of go between the buildings in different places and things. So
I believe there's a sidewalk all the way down the hill from the driveway that goes between my building and Mr. Levin's property. I think from
Okay.
there on down there is a sidewalk.
okay, sounds good. So you're in favor of us not allowing a waiver of the sidewalk in that, and
I
sort
certainly
of
would like you
imposing that
to
requirement?
think about it. I
Okay.
just, especially, if there's going to be, as you get more and more people in the area.
Okay. We'll have that discussion with the applicant here in a little bit. With respect to your initial comment about getting notice of meetings, whenever there's condominium associations and apartment complexes, notice ends up being an issue that we have this identical discussion with individuals. There's some peculiarities with what's required of notice when there's a condominium association or a management company, and almost always we end up with the applicants, not the applicants, some of the tenants or residents or condo owners coming forward and saying the notice didn't come or didn't come to me. I can tell you that our staff does look over what the notice was and how it was given to make sure it was compliant with the law. That doesn't always mean, the law doesn't always require.
Well, because the zoning board notified our management company,
Okay.
who notified us. We double-checked with our management company today, and they had not received any notice.
They are on the list of having the notice sent
Okay, and it goes out from the
from the post
department.
office. It goes from our department to the post office and out.
Okay, so both of those notices for the zoning board and the planning board come from the same place. It comes
Okay.
from Tim's department, and they're on the list. So I don't know what the error.
The
might
file
have been.
shows that it was sent.
That's all that counts.
Well,
And I guess the other question is just, the traffic flows obviously are going to be a little bit different with a residential rather than a business, because it's going to be at a different time of the day. There's going to be people going in and out at the same time as there are from the condominiums. And the way the driveway is situated, everybody's going to be coming together at a meeting point right at the top of that. In between the buildings, you can see there's sort of a T there.
Yep.
And I guess I would just request that there be some direction, how people paint on the road. There's something to sort of move traffic from killing each other.
okay, we'll have that discussion with the applicant. Generally speaking, you hit on a good point. When you change the use of the building, you change both the volume and the timing of the traffic. You've hit on the point exactly that it'll now be sort of more coincident with the timing of the other residentials. It'll also be, generally speaking, residential is a big step down in volume from commercial traffic. So,
In this case, there's been no traffic.
It's
Which I guess
it's
is-
based on assuming the building was fully occupied as
Right,
commercial.
yes,
space.
absolutely.
I mean, I'm assuming that's why he's changing, because there's no
Yeah.
traffic now.
thank you for that, Ms. Fuller. Thank you for the comments. Does any other abutters or citizens wish to weigh in? Please come forward. Take your time to get settled in and sign in, and when you're ready.
Good evening. Is this on?
It is.
Okay. Donna Bailey from 5 Crosswoods Path Boulevard also. Amy had spoken to some of the questions that I came to ask this evening. I do want to thank the Telegraph for covering the article, the fact that this meeting was going to occur tonight is a way of learning about this. And I guess I would like to say to Mr. Levine, I know you've got a history with our property. I think you were involved in maybe the condos that we now live and reside in. I'm not here to challenge anything other than to probably ask questions to get better clarification so that this can be a better project and so that we find ways to peaceably, coexist with what would become an apartment building. I think to further clarify part of what Amy was speaking about earlier with traffic, when you pull out of what's a very short, nubby parking lot now that services both the commercial building and 5 Crosswoods Path Boulevard and other units coming from a very, hilly parking lot area, there's really roughly only about 75 feet of pavement between pulling out of there and then stopping to have to try to get across DW Highway. With the elimination of exit 12 tolls and the opening up of the access highway, there is considerable congestion that's there now, and it just results in a lot of backup and wait time to be able to get out onto DW Highway. So I'm not sure what can be done about that. Maybe, to Amy's point, maybe something that, kind of like directionals on the road possibly in terms of what's an in and what's an out, might be beneficial or somewhat helpful there. The other question I had was I'm not sure if when you change from exterior to residential, if the lighting requirements change at all. With residential, you've got people coming and going all hours of the day and night. Commercial, likely not so much. And it's a very dark area there. Currently, they used to be serviced with gas lights that really weren't all that beneficial to begin with, and the gas got turned off to those years ago. So the only lighting that's right there now is whatever would be like any exterior light packs and maybe a light by a stairway door. So I'm not sure if that's something that would be addressed in terms of, as you change to a residential use. The other piece, if it is going to be apartments, I was curious as to whether or not there would be, and I don't know if this is the purview of the planning board, maybe it's an off-site discussion with Mr. Levine, as to whether there'd be a plan for an on-site management company, given that it's an actual apartment building and versus, a condominium, unit-owned complex. The other piece is going back to if it is apartments, what about bus stops? Right now, the bus stops way at the far end of Crosswoods Path Boulevard down by a, I don't know if it's shown on that picture or not, but a gazebo that's way on the far bottom end of Crosswoods Path Boulevard. So I'm not sure if the owner or who would coordinate that with the school, the school district or the town, but that was another question that...
the schools might, but I do have a question about that because every morning I drive by there and every morning there's cars and parents and kids standing right there on the corner. What are those kids and parents doing there?
On the top of Crosswoods Path Boulevard? I've never seen that, and I've lived there for 8 years. What I see are the school buses going down to the gazebo and coming back up. So I don't know if there's students that are coming from the other side, because all that's on the other side of us is one house, and then you've got the kids' play area, whatever that's called, in AAA.
I think you may be thinking of Society Hill, because I see
Society
that.
Hill,
I definitely
possibly.
see it
Oh,
as
Society
Society
Hill.
Hill.
I drive by there every morning as well on my way in, and I don't recall ever seeing people
Yeah, it
at
could
that
be.
intersection.
Understood. Okay. Other
So,
comments or questions?
I think those were, primarily my major, concerns or questions rather at this point. Again, to try to make this a better project, for the benefit of all. Hopefully we've kind of clarified. And I guess the other point that I would clarify that Amy was talking about to your question, and it came up previously, it's not a sidewalk per se. It doesn't meet the definition of a sidewalk that we have that goes down Crosswoods Path Boulevard. It's more of a path, an asphalt path, I would call it. And it does run from the beginning of Building 5, and it goes all the way down around the bend to the end of Crosswoods Path Boulevard itself.
Okay.
So as far as, a sidewalk variance, I think that I would also say that I probably don't necessarily support it without saying to the board, has anybody been over there and seen the really narrow strip of grass that goes from, especially if there's really not a play area or what have you, and there's kids there, and depending upon where a bus stop gets located, you've got an increasing amount of congestion and traffic traveling at high rates of speed in that area, trying to pass as cars are trying to come and go over the AAA area or into Crosswoods Path Boulevard, and just, I think, some serious safety issues that I would hope that would be, looked at in that regard when it came to making that decision about a waiver. And that's what I had.
Thank you for that, Ms. Bailey. I think the one thing that she had asked about that's probably, and I think you indicated this and you answered it when you were asking it, the question about whether there'd be a management company, probably not something that's within our purview to take a look at in the
Understood.
regulations. I think most of the other things, bus stops are decided by the school department, but we still
Okay.
do think and talk about bus traffic and kid traffic and all of that as part of what we do. And then lighting is something that the board can discuss with the applicant and determine whether we're satisfied with that situation.
Okay.
So,
That's all I had.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other abutters or citizens wish to weigh in? Give a minute? No? We'll close the public hearing. Mr. Levin, you can please come back to the table a little bit. Now, as we approach this with both the sidewalks and considering the traffic flow and the lighting and bus stops, that also fits into that waiver of full site plan review where we can decide whether those things are necessary or
Correct.
not.
Just a couple of clarifications. In terms of lighting, there are no minimum lighting standards in terms of anything in our regulations. We have maximum standards that don't allow certain levels to go beyond a certain point. So there are no specific requirements to have lighting for a particular facility like this in the regulations. It's just a maximum from a dark sky perspective. As it relates to the sidewalk, I think the previous commercial building on this property had previously been granted a waiver of the sidewalk. Again, with the waiver of full site plan review, the board can make a determination whether or not you feel comfortable to require that to be a waiver, or if you're comfortable with that being part of the waiver of full site plan review. I don't have a lot to talk about in terms of the bus stop issue. Generally speaking, with a 21-unit apartment building with a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units, we're not expecting, based on the multipliers for typical school-age children in this part of the state, you're probably talking maybe 6 to 8 children is the multiplier for this type of building, particularly because it's a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units.
I'd be surprised if it was 6 or 8.
It's actually
I think
the
it's gonna be
multiplier
like
came out
2.
to 5.25. So that's the information I have at this stage.
Thank you, Tim. Mr. Levin, do you want to comment on any of the items that have been brought up by any of the members of the public?
Yeah, I think the first one is that the dramatic reduction in parking and the issue over the traffic in and out. Actually, an office is very busy between 8 and 9 in the morning, which is the same time people are going out. And the office is also very busy between 5 and 6 when people are coming home. So I think the difference of traffic between coming home and leaving is probably worse as an office, or just as bad as an office as it would be at a residential. And there'll be fewer people living here than there would have been working here or had been working here in the past. The issue of the sidewalk has come up before, and I thought it was here, but I may be wrong. But I don't believe it's possible to put a sidewalk there that's very steep.
Up by DW Highway, Steve?
You mean coming down Crossroads Path?
This area along here is quite steep, and there is no sidewalk here.
The other thing I'll remind
So
the
they'd have to put a sidewalk in as well.
The other item I'll just remind the board about is with regard to sidewalk on Route 3. This is a state-controlled section of Route 3, and we do not yet have a sidewalk plan, so DOT will not accept a sidewalk within the right-of-way here.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Thanks for that bit. Tell me a little bit about what your plans are for the lighting. What's the current situation and all that? I know that we don't have minimum standards, but obviously you want something that's going to be safe for the people that are going to be in there.
Yeah, I think that without question there'll be exterior lighting on the front of the building. I think exterior lighting toward the back of the building may present a problem for the apartments living behind us. So I'd have to be careful about how we did that. But certainly the front and the walkway would be lit so that people would not stumble around or get lost in the dark.
Desiree?
I would just recommend having lighting, at least at the entrances for the building. If it's just on just the front, I assume you have multiple entrances.
There is some lighting there now, but, I'd have to take a look and see, but there'll be lighting probably sufficient to light the buildings. We won't be able to...
Mr. Levin, I don't think your microphone's on or it's not close enough to you.
I'm sorry.
There you go. That's better.
We'd have to light the front of the building because it wouldn't be safe for our people who were living there. They wouldn't want to live there unless the front of the building was reasonably well lit, and the parking area as well.
Thank you for Mr. Levin.
Is there only one entrance to the building?
No, there are two fire entrances on each end of the building. There's only one entrance in the center.
So the fire entrances are meant for emergency use only? They're not going to be places where somebody that's living there is going to...
We're going to discuss that with the fire department.
Okay. And if they will allow you to make them open, will you do so? Or is it, what's your
depends
preference?
it depends on how they would be able to be controlled.
And would they be lit?
Okay. I think that from this board standpoint, if you make them accessible to the residents as a normal means of entrance and egress, that they be lit. If they're not, then that's a choice that you make. Maybe in a fire situation, the lights come on or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think that typically they would probably not be the main entrance into the building. The elevator is in the center of the building. So most people who would want to go up a flight would want to take the elevator. They would come in the front entry.
Sure, absolutely. Let me interrupt for a second, Mr. Levin. I know that there's individuals in the back that are holding up hands, and your partner has offered, I think, some explanation. And I'm not being rude. I don't mean to not call on people that are doing that. It's just not the way I can conduct the meeting. You got to come up to the microphone and do all of that. But hang on a second. We'll get a chance to do that. It's got to control the conversation a little bit in the conduct of the meeting.
Please
so
do.
let's work through that. But don't feel that I'm ignoring you if you're trying to raise your hand and I'm not calling on you. Tim, did you have something you wanted to add?
I did. If the board is going to ask Mr. Levin to add additional lighting, is that something you would like to have an illumination plan for?
Let's discuss it and see how we go.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I think that an illumination plan is quite an expense for putting a couple of lights around a doorway in a building in an enormous parking lot.
Actually, there are lights around the doorway.
Yeah.
The front entry, the front lobby is lit.
Mr. Chairman, I've got some. As I understand it, Mr. Levin, if I can, I'm going to have to come over there and show you. Can I just?
Don't forget a microphone.
I'm confused. What bit of parking are you actually taking out?
We're taking out all of this, right like that.
So the applicant's indicating all the space on the northern edge of the parking lot.
Between the building and Crosswoods Path.
Okay.
So there'll be the parking next to the building and a driveway through that parking lot will still be there, but the parking spaces themselves, roughly 10,000 square feet of them go away.
Now, that's why I don't like it, Mr. Chairman. You see, I feel that it would be far better to take out the parking spaces that are along the front parallel to DW Highway and put some additional trees or whatever else you might like to say to make the thing. I mean, I know the building is there and we can't do a lot about it, but you know, that's an office building. I'd like to see it softened if it's going to be a residential. So I personally feel that the parking along parallel, if you like, off Daniel, immediately sort of adjacent to DW Highway, should be the parking that you eliminate. Put additional green in there, so with trees and vegetation and thing. I think it would make it a much more amenable to people who want to live there than what's there now. That's my personal opinion. I may be wrong, and obviously other people may disagree with me, but I personally feel I wouldn't want to live in that building the way it is, looking onto DW Highway. I'd like to see some nice trees shielding me from the road.
Fair point. Other members of the board wish to weigh in on things? Desiree.
I think from hiding, in regards to your landscape comment, I think hiding the front of the building closer to the building, you get more effect. Or alternatively, instead of clearing out the front, because you get rid of all that parking, that's a lot of parking to lose along that front edge. That whole street, like he's taking out the little thing, you've taken out that whole front edge. That's a big chunk of
Almost
parking.
30 spaces.
you'd take out 28 spaces against 20. 20, yes.
Yeah.
So I've lost 8 more spaces.
Which you can afford to do.
So I would suggest, and what they usually doing sections of parking and then putting in a landscape buffer, like pull out part of the part, like one or two spots in the middle and do it, and then do like another bank of like 8 or 10 parking spaces, and then do that again. Rather than, I mean, it's a little bit of maintenance though, because you're gonna have to plow, or like you won't be able to plow the whole thing. You're gonna have to do it back out and then do it again. But if you're gonna break that up, that kind of hides the cars better if you do them in little clumps. And I think looking out onto a parking lot is worse than looking out onto the road. The road's not really that big a deal, especially with as tall as the building is.
I tend to agree with that. I think that it's not so much that visually when you look at it, you think of the number of spaces, is what you see is just kind of a building in the middle of a flat plane of, not a lot of landscaping. Although there is more landscaping around the building than shows in that satellite picture, that aerial picture. I think there's some trees that have matured or some things that you've done over time that have done a little bit better.
Yeah, but Mr. Chairman, you're not shielding the building from DW Highway. Now, I mean, I've just done the math quickly. Doing what I want to do takes out 29 spaces. He's still left with 16, 23, 37.
I think he'll have plenty of parking.
67.
It's not the number of spaces. I'm not sure. The objective of shielding the building from DW Highway, I don't know if that's for the benefit of DW Highway to not see his building, or from the residents to not see DW Highway, but a resident makes a decision whether they want to live there when they look at it. And
Given the height of that building, you're not going to get trees tall enough to do anything for those that live in the second and third floors.
I'm aware of that. I just think it would look nicer. But
no question. I'm not sure how much aesthetic review we tend to do on site plan review.
Especially when you waive full site plan review.
Lynn?
If I had a choice, I'd rather see the spaces on the south side of the building gone, because then that puts you
Put you in every direction.
that puts you with more green space attached to the drainage easement, which just gives you a lot more green space that if you have people that want to go outside, you've got a lot more green space accessible.
Of course you can.
People want to park as close to the front door as they can.
Well,
Is
whether
your
you-
microphone? Hit your button on your microphone.
Than virtually anything you can think of.
I agree with you, but whether you're cutting out spaces on the north or cutting them out on the south, I think you've got the same issue. Just personal opinion. I'm not going to fight you on it.
And I don't
It's just a
think
personal
that
opinion.
And I don't want to fight you. But,
your microphone's not turned on.
Then pull it closer.
No.
Nope.
It must have been on and we turned it off. It just wasn't working.
Sorry, it was off.
There you go.
There we go.
I may be able to come up with something that answers both the questions. I think the first question that I have, the first answer that I have is, there's a great deal more, the trees that are in front of that building are quite substantially more than what you see on that photograph. It's an old photograph. They're high. In fact, we're going to have to trim some of them back. They're almost up to the second story. So there's a lot more landscaping in there than it appears on. I would like to keep the parking as I indicated initially. I don't really have a terrible objection about stripping the front off as you suggest, but I think I have a better solution to it. I think maybe what we ought to do is, in the front 28 spaces that you talked about, maybe we ought to put a couple of little islands in there with trees in them, which is kind of a compromise.
As what Desiree was saying. Yep.
Yeah, break
Why
up
don't
the
we
field
do
of parking
that?
spaces.
Why don't we do that and make it a compromise?
So you would do that in addition,
Yes.
take the northern spaces that you wanted, and then in
Yes.
addition add a couple of islands?
Yeah, we'll work out a couple of islands in there. We actually talked about it.
Okay. I think it would,
I don't want to take away all that parking because people like it, but I think a couple of islands will answer Mr. Milne's objection, which is totally legitimate.
It wasn't an objection. I was just trying to make it look better.
But
But I'd like your idea, sir, and I'd be very happy to go along with it.
Okay, then we're on the same page.
any other discussion by members of the board? Lynn?
You mentioned a dog space, dog
Yeah.
park, dog
Yes.
run.
Yeah.
How much of that space is going to be allocated to that? And describe to me what that dog area is.
You're in my kitchen now. I have two rather large ones in Nashua, so we're very familiar with how that works. We probably would use the equivalent of maybe 15 feet wide and maybe 50 feet long. And that area would be fenced, and it would have soil put down, a couple of benches and a fire hydrant, maybe a tree or two if there aren't two or three in there already. So people can, residents who have given us the DNA of their dog, because we do not let dogs in our property without taking a DNA. Once we take the DNA of the dog and charge the tenant a flat fee, a one-time charge only, what we do is if we find dog feces anywhere on the property, we send it out, have the DNA analyzed, and within 24 hours, there is a substantial fine to the tenant. I have 460 units in South Nashua. We invented this process. It's now national. And the simple fact is that I don't think I've had 5 fines in 5 years.
I think people will police their own, but I was more concerned with finding out how much space it would involve and whether it was going to be fenced.
Oh, it's got to be fenced. Yeah, it's got to be fenced. And it's self-policed, but people are very, very good about policing it. And
that answers my
we're not
question.
going to have too many dogs. We've only got 21 units. You might have, I don't know, on the average, maybe 8 or 10 dogs tops. That's all.
Yeah, I think you probably won't, but that's probably a high estimate. Other comments or questions by members of the board? Desiree.
Just real quick on the islands, I was laying it out. If you did 3 of them, it's about 6 spaces in between each island, so along the front street. If you can do with 3 islands, that would be
I'll
my
make an effort to do that.
Yeah, just recommendation. So thank you.
All right. Lynn.
And one more. Dealing with the traffic coming out of Crossroads Path onto DW Highway, is there room to actually make a left turn lane out of Crossroads Path?
Whether there is or not, there's absolutely no justification for us to require that.
Okay.
Because the traffic generation, both overall and peak hour, is significantly less than it was as a commercial property.
I think that Tim hits on a good point, which I think Mr. Levin also referred to, but I was also noticing it a little bit differently. When this project was originally laid out with that sea of parking spaces, it was designed for the traffic that would have used that many parking spaces. And if it can handle if it was designed for that traffic and passed all of the approvals necessary for a facility with that many spaces, the traffic that's going to come from a small number of apartments is far less than what it was designed for. Now, that may be different than what people have observed over the years, but it certainly meets design standards for a tremendous amount of traffic with all those spaces sitting there. So, I know that we've opened and closed the public hearing, but I did promise a couple of people who raised their hands that I'd get to them. So let me take a second and offer another opportunity if anybody wants to weigh in. If you do, please come forward. All the way up to the table. Take a minute to settle in and sign in, and then when you're ready to go, introduce yourself and tell us what's on your mind.
Okay, my name's Colleen Rush, and I live at 9 Crosswoods Path Boulevard, and I didn't intend to be here tonight. But then I got a text or an email mentioning this, so I just wanted to, when I'm sitting back there, make some observations or some things that I heard. Based on, I've lived there approximately 2 years, and I will say that when even looking at the picture that was supplied here, there's quite a few cars that are out front of the building, and that implication is that there was would have been a lot of people leaving when the gentleman mentioned between 8 and 9, or coming at 8 and 9 and then leaving at 5 o'clock. But in the past few years, if one would have seen, and that's probably one of the reasons, I doubt the occupancy of the building was that I think there were maybe 4 cars there. There was Arc Point, a silver car, a white car, and 2 other cars. So to say that it was that many people were leaving at that time in these past few years, at least in the year and a half, because that's all I can speak to, I don't think is really a true representation of what was occurring.
Thank you for clarifying that. I will get Mr. Levin to respond to it, but I don't think he meant to imply that that's what the traffic's been over the couple of years. I think that what he was saying was that's the traffic that it was designed for, and frankly, he has a right to operate it as a business that had that level of traffic. Okay. But I don't think that he meant to say the traffic, because he's here because there hasn't been any tenants in the building.
Exactly, and that we know that in the years that it was built, things have changed, like nothing but good times, and then some other things on DWF changed. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you'd like to add while you're here?
No, I think that's it. Thank you, though.
Okay, good. Thank you very
Alrighty.
much. Are there any other abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in? Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing again. Is there more discussion by members of the board? I've lost my place. So do we vote to waive full site plan review yet?
Yes, you have.
Okay, so we waive full site plan review. We've got to take up this question of sidewalks, whether they're necessary or not.
That does not need to specifically be a motion. That can be by consensus if you determine it's not applicable.
Okay. What's the will of the board?
I would suggest we don't need to deal with a waiver of sidewalks.
Okay.
We certainly can't deal with it on DW Highway, and there's such a small section there that isn't relevant.
Are there other thoughts or opinions on sidewalks?
Well, as I think, Mr. Chairman, if the situation is as the Community Development Director indicated, it matter what we say or do, we know the state who control the road at this point won't go along with us. So until we have a sidewalk plan, and I'm not going to throw a brick at anybody else on that one yet.
Why not? You have before.
I don't see there's any point in discussing sidewalks. We cannot get one in there. I'm sure if the time ever came that the state agreed that we could do something, we'd have to go cap in hand to Mr. Levin and talk to him about it. But at the minute, I think there's no point in discussing the issue.
I think that the one bit of discussion that is worth having is because of the state situation, it's better to decide that it's not necessary than try to fit it into a waiver, which doesn't really quite
Totally
apply.
agree.
Other comments or questions on sidewalks? Let's discuss and entertain a little bit of discussion about lighting and lighting plans and all of that, because I don't want to overrun that question, and I know that you guys had some interest in thinking along those lines. Nelson?
Yeah, well, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that the board consider a lighting plan for this. I mean, this is a different use, and I'm not sure if there was a lighting plan submitted with the original plan or not, but apparently not.
It dates back quite a ways.
I think it was dated before this. I think safety requires some level of lighting in there.
Well, hang on with the safety, because
yeah.
Tim's telling me we don't have a minimum standard. We have a maximum standard. So he could say my lighting plan is no lights.
He could.
And safety or not, we don't get to weigh in on that aspect of lighting when it comes to safety.
I think we have a right to weigh in on the issue of safety. And if we determine that, if he says no lighting at all.
And he hasn't said that.
He hasn't, but I'm telling you that I believe we have the right to make it a safe place. And that is part of our prerogative as planning reviewers. And I think that he should show us how it is lighted, how it will be lighted.
What my question really is does it require the full-blown illumination plan that we typically would require that shows lighting locations and foot candle levels? I'm not necessarily, what I'm saying is this is a waiver of full site plan review. You've already waived the requirement to go through the fully engineered process. If you're comfortable with indicating where lighting is going to be and that it meets full cutoff requirements, is that sufficient to satisfy the concerns of the board?
I think if the board decides that that's okay.
Would that be okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And The third thing I just wanted to mention was we've given some thought to the dogs in the neighborhood, but what about other amenities in that grassy space? Can we make that a bit more human-friendly as well as dog-friendly in the way of adding some amenities such as benches, pathways, or something attractive to people that would make it park-like, if you will, in that area that's going to be
forward. I know you
grass.
mentioned benches and things, but let me let you fill in the blanks on that.
There'd be benches in the probably in the dog area. It's only the space. The remaining space would only be about 25 feet wide. It would be grassed, and it would be comfortable for people to sit on the grass or walk on it. No, just as much as all the other grassy areas in the community are. I don't think it would make any sense, real sense, to spend accountable funds to put in additional benches. People who want to sit and relax there can sit and watch the dogs play. There'll be benches for that.
You're saying there will be some benches then? Or
There'll be some benches in the dog area,
in
which
the
is
dog-
right. It's adjacent to it.
You got to sit in with the dogs, though. I mean, maybe that's okay.
Well, yeah, but it's a short fence. They can see. They'll be able to see it all right. I don't think we need any additional benches. I suppose I could take one bench and put it outside there if that made everybody happy. But if it came to the point where it was a useful amenity that would be satisfactory and used by the people, I would entertain it. But I have to tell you the honest truth. It's just to put a bench on a piece of grass that's maybe 15 or 20 feet wide and 50 feet long isn't going to necessarily make people want to sit on it. And if they see a bench in the park here, we have people sitting in our dog park now who don't have dogs. And they love it. They love to sit there and watch the dogs play.
I guess I thought the grassy area was bigger than you're describing.
No, it really isn't. The whole area is maybe 50 feet wide by 100 feet long. We're going to use 25 feet of it. It's split in half probably. Half the dog park and half just grass.
Okay. Other comments or questions by members of the board? Mr. Russo,
I'd just like to touch back on the...
is your microphone turned on?
Oh, maybe. There we go. All right. I want to go back to the illumination plan. Again, from what I understand here is that this has been, full site plan review has been waived, and you're just kind of touching on a few things to try to adapt this to your new use. I have seen in the past where lighting plans can be a problem after the fact because it wasn't spelled out. I would absolutely be a proponent of going with an illumination plan. You guys have been, the town has graciously given you the opportunity to try to get through this, as feasibly as possible. But I think in this case, I would be certainly amenable to going with the full illumination plan. I don't think it's that huge of an expense, and I think it would put a lot of people's minds at ease. I don't know if everybody, again, I've been through a few plans where they said, nope, there's not going to be any lighting, and then you had 30-foot towers put up. Okay. And the same token, if you talk to an electrician and say, well, we just want to throw some lights on the side of the building. Are they the right lights? Are they down lights? Are they floodlights? Who knows? I think for the benefit of the board, it probably would not be a bad idea to go along with that. Again, it's really up to the board, but I just wanted to give my input on this.
Thank you for that. I wanted to just get some understanding when you're asking for a full lighting plan. Tim has suggested something short of that, which is, show me where the lights are going to be, show me that they meet our standards for whether they shine up, down, and sideways. The full lighting plan that we sometimes require is an engineered thing that measures the candle power at every spot along the parking lot, and then that plan is provided to our peer reviewer, who's going to take a look at it and decide, does it meet our regulations, and do calculations about ratios.
In
and
this
all of
case,
that
we
stuff.
would not, because we have not utilized peer review for the project of this nature.
Right.
It would be reviewed in-house by staff.
And do you do those kinds of calculations of the ratios and all the things for the lighting standards in-house?
I know how to do that, yes.
There's a bit of work for you to do then, if we go down that path. I think that understanding, in my view, and I'm my view is that the lesser standard that you were talking about.
Yeah, essentially, the one part of the lighting plan that I'm suggesting might be not part of the requirement is the measurement of foot candle levels at the ground level. I'd still be looking for locations, details, and notes on the plan that indicate that they meet their standards of the regulations.
I would be amenable to that.
Any other comments or questions on lighting? Any other comments or questions on other aspects of the project or plan? Tim?
Just to summarize my notes here, if you're looking at the memo and the recommended conditions of approval, I'm suggesting we replace item number 3 with a new condition that would indicate that the applicant shall indicate the pavement to be removed, the location of the dog park area, as well as landscape islands to be interspersed along the parking along DW Highway. In addition, to note the parking requirement from the regulations versus what is to be provided. And then an additional condition that should additional lighting be added, locations, details, and notations indicating compliance with regulations to be added to the plan.
Thank you for summarizing that, Tim. Are there other comments or questions by members of the board? Is the board prepared to take final action on this?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we grant final acceptance of this project.
Final approval.
Final approval. Final approval. I'm looking at the right word. Final approval of this project, subject to the conditions put in by the memo of September the 30th, provided by Gillian Harris, with the additional items that Mr. Thompson has just indicated, and then on that basis we could agree for the project to go ahead.
Is there a second for Mr. Mills' motion? Desiree Fault seconds. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the motion as presented, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 601 with Mr. Russo abstaining for final approval. So thank you very much. You're all set to go. Thank you, Tim, for the explanations. Is that one? I know that sometimes these things get complicated. That brings us to item 5 on our agenda, which is Daniel Higginson at Meridian Land Services as the applicant and Vasilio Gakis as the owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of a 2-lot minor subdivision. The parcels are located at 17 Beaverbrook Road in the R1 Residential and Aquifer Conservation and Flood Hazard Conservation Districts. Tax map 6C, lot 406. Tim, what do we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is again a minor subdivision, 2 lots. The existing property is about 76.2 acres, predominantly wetland area. There are some small areas of upland that are available for building on the property. The applicant received a variance from the zoning board back in July to allow the creation of the new lots to have less than the required contiguous upland of 100,000 square feet. So what you have before you tonight is the minor subdivision. The same question will be asked as we get through this regarding the sidewalk waiver and whether or not a determination the board can make as to whether or not that is necessary. There is also an actual waiver request that is requested from section 406(1)(I), seeking to waive the requirement for monumentation at the lot corners that are located within the wetland areas.
Thank you, Tim. Is the applicant here? Please come forward. Introduce yourself again.
Dan Higginson with Meridian Land Services.
Tell us where we're at with the project.
Once again, Tim did a wonderful job summarizing it. This page that I have shown is the proposed 10-acre lot. There was some question by the staff as to where the access to the building portion of the lot would be. It's the area labeled as formerly right-of-way, located between lot 6C 561 and 6C 553. That right-of-way is the remnant of the original subdivision of the land. It was broken into many small parcels that were then joined to become what it is now. Due to the fact that it's wet, it wasn't suitable for development over a large portion of the rear.
So it's no longer a right-of-way for the benefit of anybody other than
The immediate abutters and the Vasilios Gakis, who actually owns the fee land.
So do the abutters use it for a right of access? Is it
Nope.
needed to them? No, okay, so it is a former right-of-way.
Well, it's a former right-of-way that they still have rights to, but they do not use at this exact point in time.
Okay. So the two on the left and right of that driveway would still have rights to use it? Because those are deeded to them, I suppose?
Correct.
And that's gonna be where the driveway is for the lot that you're gonna subdivide off and build on?
Yes.
For the benefit, well, for everybody's benefit, can you show us where you would build on the
Sure.
site?
The buildable area is right in here, so the leach field and house would be somewhere in this vicinity in the northeast corner.
How much upland buildable area do you have?
On that area, there's about 80,000 square feet, and then there's another area of a little over 20,000. So we do have the 100,000 that's required, but we got the zoning variance because it wasn't contiguous. It's two separate parcels.
So the part that you'd build on there is the 80,000, that's roughly not quite 2 acres, but it's
Correct.
a pretty good chunk. The other former right-of-way on the other side of the parcel, what's the status of it?
Same thing as the one in the middle, except there's only one abutter to it that has rights to it. That abutter has 2 lots. So technically, I guess if the lots are owned by different individuals, then they would both have rights to it, but it's the same individual that owns both lots.
Okay. So although they're both marked former, technically they each have people that have vested rights that make those right-of-ways
They're existing.
some future there. They're not
We can change the language on
they're
that.
not extinguished. Okay. Are there any other lots or property that you would anticipate trying to access through those proposed rights or things marked former right-of-way?
No.
Okay. So you wouldn't have a problem putting a note on the plan saying that there aren't any more access ways through the property other than those?
For the proposed subdivision lot or for,
For any plan that reflects what's marked as former rights-of-way, to indicate that those 2 rights-of-way are for the benefit of the appropriate parcels described there, and there won't be any additional access granted.
yes.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're looking for a note to be added to the plan to indicate that the existing rights of abutting property owners to those, quote, former right-of-ways continues to exist, but no further
Won't be expanded, yeah.
expansion of those rights.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay. Any other comments or questions by members of the board? Nelson?
Yeah, I'd like to know the soils types in here. Have you done a soils survey to find out what
We've done
your 80,000 square feet?
We've done test pits. We haven't done any high-intensity soil work out there. It is suitable for individual septic for residents, both town and state standards. As far as the actual soil types, I'm not aware of what they are, but we can certainly add that to the plan.
It should be added to the plan, in my view. And also, have you submitted to DES the soils results, the test pit results?
We have not because the
No.
lot's greater than 5 acres, so it's not required.
Oh, yeah.
Any lot that's greater than 5 acres does not require state subdivision approval.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
It's important to know.
It's important to know, yes, but the law doesn't require it.
Thank you. I didn't want to interrupt Nelson's questions, but it occurs to me we haven't decided to accept the application as complete. And we're getting into some of the details that are usually part of the discussion after we do that. What's the will of the board with respect to accepting the application as complete?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept that this application is complete to give us the opportunity to discuss it.
Is there a second for Mr. Milne's motion?
Second.
I saw Jeff first. We'll call Jeff Sebring as the second. Any other discussion on completion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? Mr. Russo abstaining, 601 to accept the application as complete. Is there more that you'd like to offer us, or when it takes a little public testimony, or?
I'm good.
Okay, sounds good. Are there any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in on this application before the board considers the various requests? There's a waiver and some other details. Seeing none, no members of the public wish to weigh in. What's the will of the board? We don't have to do anything with the minor subdivision, right?
You need to determine whether or not a sidewalk could be required, or you can determine it's not necessary, and there is the waiver for the monumentation.
Okay. What's the will of the board with respect to the monumentation waiver?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we agree that it would be unnecessary to put in the monumentation in the area of the property that is currently classified as wetlands.
Second. I'm sorry, what?
Because
we're deciding it's not necessary, though, right?
This is for the monumentation.
Oh, this is the waiver.
Strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation.
Is there a second for Mr. Milne's motion?
Second.
Second by Ms. Fault to waive the monumentation in the wetlands. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-1 with Mr. Russo abstaining. What's the will of the board with respect to determining whether a sidewalk waiver is necessary, or that the sidewalk requirement does not apply?
Consensus, again, would be fine for this.
I'm going to suggest, as I have on the others, that it's not necessary.
I agree.
I share that view. Are there any others that wish to indicate a consensus?
I agree.
All right. I think that's enough of a consensus for me, Tim. How about you? Okay. Any other discussion by members of the board on the application one way or another? Tom?
Yeah, my, getting a little too myopic here, but it says 10 acres and then 43,577 square feet.
There's a typo there that needs to be fixed.
Okay.
It's missing a zero.
You think?
Yeah.
Slight one.
It's off by a factor of 10. That's the margin of error.
Yeah. 10%.
It also has one property owner here, two property owners listed at the same address on 1 Walden Drive. Lots 6C 123 and 124. And whenever I've sent mail to the one lot, it's always been on Patton Road.
Oh, the one you indicate. Oh, I got you.
That's how the assessing record lists it.
Well, and perhaps they know better than I.
We'll double check that and make sure.
If it is the way the assessing record's listed, that's what we require, correct?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm just curious.
It is interesting. Good catch. Nice notice. Any other comments or questions? What's the will of the board with respect to final disposition of the application?
Before we go there,
What do you got for me?
I've added 2 additional items under planning staff technical comments. One, to add a note relative to the former right-of-ways as was discussed earlier tonight, and then additionally to add the soil types to the plan as was suggested by Nelson.
Okay, if someone's willing to make a motion, then those would be added to it, I suppose. Is there anybody willing to make a motion on this
Mr.
project?
Chair, I make a motion we grant final approval subject to the conditions of the original project dated September the 29th with the additional items that have just been indicated by Mr. Thompson.
Is there a second for Mr. Milne's motion?
I'll
Second.
Second by Lynn Christensen this time. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-1 with Mr. Russo abstaining. Thank you very much. All set. Thank you. Item number 6 on our agenda, Northview Homes and Development, Inc. is the applicant and Elaine and Walter Domian as the owners. Review for acceptance and consideration of a final approval of an application for a 2-lot minor subdivision. The parcel is located at 15 Brenda Lane in the R1 Residential and Aquifer Conservation Districts, Flood Hazard Conservation District, Shoreland Protection Area, and it is tax map 6D, lot 37. Tim, what do we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Again, this is a 2-lot minor subdivision. There is a little bit of uniqueness to this particular parcel. Based on soils, this is currently an R1 zoned lot. However, the applicant is proposing a sewer easement and extension of sewer to service this parcel, coupled with the existence of Merrimack Village District Water. Once that happens, this parcel would then meet the R4 requirements, which has a minimum lot size of 40,000 square feet, 20,000 square feet of contiguous non-wetland soils, and 150 feet of frontage. So, again, one of the things that is not in Jillian's memo that I will recommend if we get to the point of conditional approval tonight is adding some additional conditions of approval related to the installation of that sewer line and any necessary wetland permitting, as those would be required in order for the zoning of this lot to change to R4.
Thank you, Tim. Good to see you again. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening, Ken Clinton with Meridian Land Services, and I apologize for my casual attire, but I just came back from my son's soccer practice, and I'm a coach, so didn't have much time in between, so.
No worries. I don't know if we've got
We're
all
all
the
set.
AV. I don't have it on mine, but
No
that's
dress code in
right.
the
Figured
site
out.
plan review ordinance.
Ken, good to see you again. What do we got?
Well, this is a two-lot subdivision, as indicated by Tim in his memo, and what it is Brenda Lane is an old subdivision from the 1970s, I think mid-70s, 74, 76, in that era. And there's a variety of lots created on it. It has municipal MVD water, but it does not have sewer currently, so all of the residences are septic. We are extending, we have little technical difficulties. We are extending sewer from Pearson Road. Last year we had a project that involved extending sewer from Bedford Road up Pearson. It was known as the Coda subdivision. There was two short cul-de-sacs. One was named Hamilton Court. The other one was Barbie Court.
I remember.
So the sewer is into that subdivision now, and we are proposing to extend the sewer main, the town main, through the Coda property, through that subdivision, across Bad Boosick Brook to Brenda, and then on towards Whispering Pine to serve other residences in town, and then a future subdivision that we expect you'll see an application before you in the near future.
What size is the main that you're going to extend?
At this point, it's 12-inch through this particular Coda property. However, the excuse me, I'm trying to also talk and do this at the same time. The main through the Coda property, I believe, is 12-inch, but it'll be stepping down. There's a siphon that is going to be used, a siphon that crosses the brook, because you have a high elevation on one side, a high elevation on the other side, and you have to get under the brook. It's like a big U or a big V, if you will. And the way that works is you actually have a reduction in size of the pipe and pressure head, and a lot of sewer calculations that I can't get into basically means the sewer can get one side of the brook to the other. And there's a step down in the pipe size once it goes gravity. So it's 2 6-inch pipes, as I understand, for the siphon. When we come out on the other side on Brenda, it's likely only going to be 8 inches, perhaps 10, because the volume of future connectivity isn't there to require 12-inch at that point.
So is all of this work with the extension and the siphon and all that stuff being done at your client's expense, or is this something that MVD is already working on?
It's actually, it's not necessarily,
Not MVD,
it's
Public
not the
Works.
Merrimack wastewater,
Right.
although they're part of the design process and approval, sir. It's really a private extension, and I'll tell you that it's another developer, Lamontagne Builders, who ultimately would be an end user, if you will, but it's also part of the master plan.
This will eventually get to Greenfield Farms.
Okay.
So, in that respect, the overall design of the sewer, as Tim indicated, that's in process. And while this particular lot now exists as a 4.6-acre lot, the new lot that we're talking about creating is lot 6037-1. To accommodate the sewer crossing at Bad Boosick Brook, we have a proposed sewer easement through this section. Not exactly parallel with the property line, just because of the nature of the best location for the sewer manholes and the siphon, but effectively crisscrossing it in this location here, leaving on its south side a proposed lot of 1.3 acres. As an R4 lot, it requires 40,000 square feet gross, 25 of that to be upland, and that's what we have here. a little over 25,000 upland and much greater than 40 to accommodate that. There's a fair amount of wetlands on the east side of this proposed lot adjacent to Babusick Brook. While Babusick Brook is a flow in a certain channel, it has certain lowland areas that seasonally flood and that are considered jurisdictional wetlands, and that's what we have for certainly the back half, if you will, or the easterly half of this proposed lot. The rest of the land is built upon. The Damians reside there in their house. They have a paved driveway. They have a pool in the front yard with a shed as opposed to the backyard, just because the depth of where their house is off the road, and they have a leach field in the back. So also on their property is an existing drainage easement that was part of the original subdivision. There are a couple of catch basins in Brenda Lane, as you see my cursor up here, and it outlets down this drainage easement and then ultimately ends up in Babusick Brook. As far as some of the staff comments, if I could touch on those briefly.
Well, before you touch on the staff comments, let's decide if we're complete and accept jurisdiction. What's the will of the board with respect to determining whether the application is complete?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we consider that we accept this for discussion, review, that it's complete enough for us to discuss this.
Okay, is there a second for Mr. Milne's motion?
I'll second it.
Second by Desiree. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? 601 with Mr. Russo abstaining to find the application complete. Ken, please do now take up the discussion about some of the staff comments.
I'm going to skip the waiver comment for last. Recommendations, obviously, number one, final plans and MyLAS to provide professional endorsements, no problem. I'm going to skip the waivers. Draft copy of any proposed easements. Touching on the sewer easement that we're proposing, as that design is separate from the actual subdivision plan, that's in design phase now, soon to be submitted to both the town, which then it'll go to the state DES for their approval. Once we have a sense that that location of the sewer line is firm, we can complete the description and the easement of the actual easement document. So it's fine to say that this is conditioned on that.
Let me ask you a question before you do that. Who's the easement holder? Is this between the two abutting parcels, or is this an easement to the town?
It would be the easement to the town.
Okay.
Item 4 on the recommendations suggests that we receive all necessary state permits for the subdivision. There are no state permits for the subdivision because this would be a municipal water and sewer lot, so state subdivision is not approved, not necessary. There's a shoreland application that would need to be filed by whomever is seeking a building permit on lot 37-1. It's not part of the subdivision approval, but it's part of the development of that lot.
Yep.
Once somebody decides, I want this size house, I want this type of a driveway in this configuration, and I want to have a backyard and cut whatever trees, that is the application for shoreland at that time, not necessarily during the subdivision approval process.
We can move that to a general condition.
We actually have a note on our plan that it says it's required, just to put public on notice.
Now, there's also some DES approvals with respect to that sewer installation, right?
There is. At the time of the design itself, from a sewer standpoint, is really based on the nuts and bolts of the sewer design specifically, not necessarily impacts to the land. The technique of construction of this siphon really drives the nature of DES permitting, being a wetlands permit and its own shoreland permit. Alteration of terrain is not necessarily required because it's a public utility, and they don't necessarily fall under the jurisdiction of alteration of terrain permitting. But there will be two permits, shoreline and DES wetlands. And I was before the Conservation Commission last night talking about this project and made sure that they understood that although they didn't have specific comments relative to the two-lot subdivision, they recognized that we will have to be back before them with the wetlands permit prior to construction to talk about the technique of installing the siphon and what some of the wetland impacts may be, why, and how they'll be minimized.
Do you anticipate the sewer installations going to get constructed and these two lots developed on their own, or is this sort of envisioning some of those other users coming online and sharing the cost of the siphon?
As far as the cost sharing goes, I can't comment. I'm not sure how that may or may not work.
Okay.
Obviously, from a private developer standpoint, they would like to recoup any costs as much as possible. The line has to be installed, in my opinion, in operational for a CO to be given on lot 37-1. Then, with a line operational, abutters along the line, landowners, residents can hook up as they would like to, or a certain time period I understand they're required to.
I'm using your application to learn a little bit because we had an experience probably more than a year ago where a siphon was discussed and two parties were before us, one suggesting that the costs were off the planet astronomical and the other saying, no, they're cheap and reasonable. And if it's something you could undertake as a part of one lot being built with one house, it tells me which one of those parties.
I can assure you that it's not economical to do a siphon for one lot.
It's not economical?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
So you're doing this with the others in mind?
My role in any future developments as an end user is I'm not part of that proposal.
Okay, I gotcha.
I've been hired Meridian's been hired to do the design of the extension to a certain point on Whispering Pine. Once it's there, another consultant at this point has the project that the end user would be.
Okay.
Along the route, everybody has the opportunity to hook up, and then after a certain time period, I understand is supposed to hook up. And that'll be part of the master plan, or it'll actually comply with the master plan guidelines for that.
But Ken, surely the siphon has to go in and the whole thing approved physically, be there before we can sign off on the subdivision.
Well, I don't believe so, actually, Alistair. I equate this much the same way that we've recently done, in fact, the Coda subdivision, which this line comes through to get here. The Coda subdivision was 13 lots, 2 short cul-de-sacs, but there was no sewer on the premises.
That's right.
You approved that.
Yes.
Signed it, recorded it. Lots were sold. The sewer was not.
Some buildings going on. Yeah, I'm fully aware
and
of
the lots weren't. The sewer wasn't completed, and it certainly wasn't accepted. Old Blood subdivision, Chestnut Hill, 71 lots. That's approved. The sewer's not constructed.
So, Tim, tell me what you got to weigh in.
It's not signed, however. In both of those cases, we also had financial surety to ensure that the town was covered, that if the construction did not take place, that was the reasonable assurance that gave the planning board the ability to sign those plans. In this case, we're talking about physically changing the zoning from one district to another, dependent upon the installation of that sewer. So it either needs to be bonded for or installed before the planning board, in my opinion, would be able to sign these plans.
That's where I was going. Because
I think that change of zoning does present a bit of a difference in this. I think you're right on the money with that, Tim. Now, do we usually bond in minor subdivisions?
Yeah, I don't foresee that as reasonable in this case. I would, if that's the position of the board, then I would ask that we have a longer than normal conditional of approval period.
Absolutely have no problem with that.
Yeah.
But I do not see any reason, any way, based on the way the zoning ordinance is constructed, for us to be able to sign this plan prior to the sewer being available to that lot because of the change in zoning.
I know it's a 7-member board with some alternates, but I tend to agree with Tim. I think that I'd vote in that direction as well, because it's the change in zoning. Other than that, saying that something will get done before COs get issued and all that stuff is a different cat. But giving you more time to accomplish that and arrange for other parties to privately do whatever they wish to do, I don't have a problem with
As a
that
condition, I would probably hope that we would have the option to do either if it was deemed reasonable from a developer standpoint to issue that bond, so that this lot would become available in order to then move forward and have the plan signed. They could do so, or if we had an extended period of conditional approval time.
I was going to suggest 2 years.
Yeah, I had 2 years in my mind.
I wouldn't have any objection to doing the 2-year period and also giving you the option to bond it instead of build it.
Yeah, but I would like to have both of those as an option. So if you want to move on from that for the moment and touch on a couple other things, we can circle back if you like.
Now, but bonding, it does present sort of a little bit of a topic to think through in terms of the deadlines when a bond would be called and when a CO could be issued and all of that stuff. Because if you're putting the construction of it into potentially a process where the bond gets called and the town builds it, your time frame changes quite a bit. And obviously, nobody would do that voluntarily, but.
No. Understood.
What else you got for us?
The rest of the items are fairly small. I have not seen any comments from Department of Public Works or Fire Department, MVD. So having not received them at this point, I'd be surprised if we did. As I mentioned, I was before the Conservation Commission last night just to see if they had any other concerns relative to the lot itself. I'm not sure if you received any preliminary memo on that.
From the Conservation Commission, I did, and you accurately reflected that they don't have any comments on the plan as it stands now, or they think you've addressed all their normal comments, and that they want to be a part of the DES approval processes going forward.
And I indicated to them that we would be back before them with the wetlands permit at some point in the future.
And I believe, is this the one that Chairman Tenhave recused himself on?
Yes, it was.
Yes. Okay.
There's two other items that I felt really needed to be focused on more so. I saved them to last. One is seeking appropriate relief from the zoning board for a shed and house location that technically fall within the 40-foot setback from wetlands.
Before you go too far into that, Ken, the reason it's worded the way it is, originally Jillian had written this to say shall obtain. I wanted her to back off on that so that we have the opportunity to discuss this further with legal counsel as to whether or not these even are applicable given the circumstances of the subdivision of the lot, because that 40-foot building setback did not exist at the time this lot was developed. So it is a very good possibility that no relief from the zoning board will be necessary here.
So as my professional opinion is that none is necessary at all. We're in agreement that we will work this issue out with community development staff, and if it's found conclusive to require relief, we will then seek it. However, we do not want that to be an absolute condition of any approval.
Okay. Is there a way that we can word this so that we can capture all of those intentions in a sentence or two?
You want me to take a crack at it, Tim?
You could, but I feel comfortable with it as a condition of approval.
Okay. And which condition are we talking about?
Number 5.
I suppose since it says as necessary, we all understand that it may not be.
That's exactly why I had it reworded.
So,
That's exactly why I had it reworded before it was presented to the board.
so as long as it's understood in that context, I'm fine with it.
Okay. That's the way I understand it, and I've seen Tim's department do that frequently to put in as necessary for things that we're not sure whether we.
Yeah, I had scoured
Have to
the
do.
ordinance and the regulations trying to find something that would indicate that it's an absolute need. I can't find that. And so
You and I are in agreement. That's why I had.
believe it's pre-existing non-conforming and therefore is not a violation that needs relief.
Yeah. My only hesitation
we'll work with-
my only hesitation in completely agreeing with Ken on this is the way the wording is constructed for the wetlands ordinance, whereas it specifically exempts the 25-foot buffer from any lot created after 2000. But however, it does require the 40-foot building setback for development that takes place regardless.
Okay. I got you.
So we're in agreement to confirm that and then do what's necessary.
Terrific. Thanks.
And then lastly, I have comment on sidewalks. I understand you've had a couple of other applications this evening that address this. In this particular case, it's my opinion that 4.06.1 is absolutely not applicable, as this subdivision is not on a collector street. As a minor subdivision that's not on a collector street, sidewalks are clearly not required. As the 4.06.1 R reads, all residential subdivision plans shall provide for a paved pedestrian way or sidewalk to be constructed along all existing or proposed collector streets. This is neither an existing nor a proposed collector street, so therefore that doesn't apply. However, just in case the board felt otherwise, I have a rate request if you'd like to consider it.
Oh, come on, Ken. We'll just make you build the sidewalks. Couldn't do it. Just kidding.
If you believe that it's required to waive that, I'm happy to provide this. If you do not feel it's required, then
Let's see
I'll
what the
keep
will
my
of the board
page.
is. What do you guys think on the sidewalk waiver? Or
You want me to step in on
go ahead.
the fourth one?
Yeah, this could
I
be.
want to be consistent tonight.
And in the sense of being consistent, we would decide that it wasn't necessary. Are there others that wish to weigh in on a consensus? As much as I want to make you build sidewalks, Ken, I'm going to sort of go with the consensus and say, that it isn't necessary. Other issues that you want to address or discuss with us?
No, I'd be happy to hear if there's any member of the public or any board questions.
Okay. There are no waivers requested, so the board doesn't have to address that. Are there, I guess you guys are here for something, so are there abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in and provide the board with some information before we consider what to do with this application? Please come forward. Ken, can you give some space?
If you don't mind sitting next to me.
Yeah, you can leave the chart up there.
I'll stroll around if you'd like.
Take a minute to sign in, and when you're ready, tell us what you got.
My name is Douglas Botham. I live at 11 Brenda Lane, so I am the butter just south of this particular proposal.
If you will, Douglas, I'm going to show your house so everybody can see the proximity of it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about right. I was wondering, first of all, we're going to put this is it's new to me about this proposed sewer line, but I guess the idea is we're going to put a sewer line from Pearson Road over to Brenda Lane for the purpose of one lot. Is that it?
Well, it's part of this approval because this is the piece of land that it's on, but I think what the applicant is suggesting is that it's sized and there's sort of everybody's view towards there being more houses available to it. Are you asking that because you have some interest in getting your home connected, or because you don't want to?
Well, if you're on a septic system, you'd always like to have a door to back out of if the thing goes bad.
Yes,
if there
you're
was
right
a
about
system
that.
there. It was a number of years ago that we, in the town, we were looking to put sewage through that whole area, and it was voted down. I thought it was a pretty good idea at the time. Effectively, it would have been pretty cost-effective looking back. But I was just wondering, were we going to have ability to use it if it became necessary, or is it solely for one lot?
I think probably we can get part of that answered, but not necessarily all of it. I think that what will be built there will be controlled by the town, and if the town wants to provide you access to it, they certainly could do that. Looking at the configuration of it, it looks like it's angling off a little bit away from your property, so it doesn't look like it'll be directly right out in front of your house.
No, it would not.
And so it might have some...
It would have to run up, I can see, about 400 feet probably.
Yeah, something like that. Now, how all of that would occur and get approved and all of that stuff's probably a little more than I can straighten out for you in a couple of sentences. But
the other thing is I'm curious about is what would be the setback of a house put on that lot? Because I've lived there since '78, and as I remember, I knew the builder well, and that particular section, he opted at the time not to build on because of the severe drop off at the back. It's a real slope.
Sure.
And his opinion at the time, it just wasn't feasible to put a home on that lot because of the creek. And I can tell you that in the years I've lived there, I've seen that creek rise up pretty high. I've seen it get within, well, let's say about 8 to 10 feet of my basement.
Yeah, you're correct.
So
it is
what
very
I'm
steep in the
suggesting
back.
is that the back of that lot is it's going to go underwater big time at some point.
Most of the back of that lot's wetland anyway, so he would be building on it. But his setback from the road's 30 feet.
Only 30 feet.
It's 30 feet from the front, 20 from the side, and 60 from the rear. However, in this case, the rear property line setback doesn't matter because there's a 40-foot building setback from the edge of the wetland.
It's going to look a little out of place at 30 feet. Most of the homes on that street run 40 to 50 feet back.
It doesn't necessarily mean that he has to place it at 30 feet, but that is the minimum.
That's the minimum. So he could go up to 30 feet.
He could go more than 30 feet. He's got to go at least 30.
He has to be at least 30 feet from the road, but he could set it back further if he could comply with the other side.
It's going to be tough. All right, that's all I was interested in knowing.
Yeah. There is a building envelope there that's shown on the plan. Exactly where it would fit in there and how close to the road, I think, would be up to the final owner who wants to get permits to do those things, but it does look like that there's a sizable enough building envelope to allow them to do that.
Well, my guess is you'd probably want to get to the minimum of 30 feet because of the water level that comes up off the creek from time to time.
If I was building a house, I'd put it as far from the wetlands as I could get it.
And I was saying is at 30 feet, it's going to be closer to the street than any other house on the street.
Yeah, I think you're right. It looks like it would be.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Are there other butters who wish to weigh in? Please come forward. Take a minute to sign in and get settled, and when you're ready, tell us what's on your mind.
Thank you. Dustin Muzzerole, 14 Brenda Lane.
Say your name again?
Dustin
Dustin.
Muzzerole.
Got it.
Directly across from the proposed new home. I just want to go on record as saying I'm against changing the zoning from R1 to R4. I don't think 30 feet is enough, and I think if he wants to push the house further back, it's going to fall off the edge. And I just want to go on record also saying I'm not against infrastructure, and I'm not against the sewer line. And they shouldn't, I don't feel they should try to get a foothold on Brenda Lane by using that piece of property. I'm okay with them going up into the neighborhood. It would be nice at some point to hook up to that, but I think it's, as Doug pointed out, it is too close to the road. I am over 100 feet back. Most of the houses on that street, up to that point at least, are pretty close to what I'm at. I might be a few feet further than most people, but my setback is over 100 feet. You know, if they want to go, you know, as he said, it's not really cost effective to put that in. So what is the point of, you know, going through all these hoops for the wetlands and, you know, putting something in that's out of place when there are bigger fish to fry at the end of the road? That's, you know, that's where I stand on the issue.
Thank you very much.
If I can, Bob, just to clarify on the zoning piece of this, the mere fact that water and sewer become available to this lot makes this an R4 lot, regardless of whether or not they decide to build on it or not.
So they're required to change it at that point?
If the lot has access to municipal water and sewer, it becomes eligible for R4 zoning, which has the 40,000 square foot requirement.
So all they have to do is apply and it automatically gets approved?
If it has access to, it has to either be constructed or bonded before the zoning of that lot would be changed.
Well, I ask you to really look at that, take a close look at that lot. Building on there would be very difficult, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Does anyone else wish to weigh in? Going once, going twice? No other comments? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Ken, do you want to respond to the comments that we heard from the two individuals that are near your proposed project?
Just to the fact that I certainly understand their concerns and obviously the change in the neighborhood. To Mr. Botham's comments, yes, there is a fairly steep slope in the back of this building envelope with relief. And as you may see, I'll go back to the topographic plan for a moment. We show the 100-year flood line. This is a blue or cyan color line that's wrapping here. So if you see, here's the edge of the delineated wet flagged by our wetland scientists. And then this is a calculated flood elevation, not just a graphical one at a certain elevation. So this is all correct. And so, yes, indeed, as I mentioned earlier, this lowland that's wet adjacent to Babusa Brook seasonally does flood. However, it's not necessarily flowing all the time. So I recognize that, especially in Mr. Botham's case, he has this backwater that wraps up right behind his house on occasion too. So it's a logical and legitimate comment from him, but it does not mean that this building envelope is not suitable. It is.
Understood. Other comments or questions by members of the board? Nelson?
Yeah, a couple questions. First of all, do you show anywhere there the 500-year flood or the equivalent?
No.
What?
No, we don't.
No. Do you have an idea where that is?
No, I do not.
What's the elevation for the 500-year flood in Merrimack?
I have no idea.
Depends where you are.
Yeah, it's location dependent. In this particular case, the 100-year flood is 177 or so.
Okay.
I mean, if you're talking about 500-year flood, that means most places next to flood sources are going to be inundated.
Well, yeah, but anything you build in there has to be flood-proofed according to our regulations. If you build
Not
in...
for a 500-year.
What?
Not for 500. Just 100.
No, for 100, you don't build at all.
If you're under the 100, you don't build at all, but
Yeah.
over 100 to 500, I'm hearing from
No
Tim.
restrictions.
I think the restriction is it has to accommodate the flood.
I'm not aware of anything that says that.
Yeah, let Tim
okay.
take a look at
Let
it.
Tim
Other-
take a look at it. Meanwhile, were there any comments from the Department of Public Works so far? Has the Department of Public Works had an opportunity to look at this?
We've submitted all the necessary plans and copies that go to all the different staff and departments, and we've received no comments.
We have not received comments yet.
Okay.
If there are any, they will be relayed to the applicant.
Okay, so we don't know what their thought is on all of this right now.
Well, with regard to the sewer, I can say that they are cooperating with the applicant in this case, as well as the other applicant associated with the LaMontagne project. So they are very involved in both the design and the approval for the sewer line extension to go to that other project.
Yeah, and the thing that concerns me is last time we heard there was some differences of opinion between what our public...
This is why they're working on this solution, which is not what the original, what Mr. LaMontagne was looking for. This is an alternative to that is working through the Public Works process, and to this point has the support of the Public Works Department.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments and questions by members of the board? There being no waiver requests, it's ripe for the board to consider whether it's ready for final disposition. What's the will of the board with respect to final disposition, if any?
Chairman, as a means of testing the water, I'll make a motion that we consider final approval of this application with all the conditions that were listed in the original memo from Gillian Harris dated September the 30th, with, as I recall, at least we've agreed to either a
If I can,
Please do.
I was looking something else up. Number one, changing the 6 months to 2-year period for the conditions of approval to be met.
Yep.
Number 4, to be moved to a general condition of approval as it relates to the shoreland impact permit for the construction on the lot itself. To add an additional condition regarding the coordination with the town and DES regarding the sewer construction and wetland and shoreland permitting process. And lastly, that the applicant to have the option of bonding the installation of the sewer in order to bring the project forward for plan signature.
Okay. So is it your intent to make a motion consistent with what Tim just...
I'm very happy to do so, Mr. Chairman. I would
So
like to
moved.
add all the conditions that Mr. Thompson put in.
So moved. Is there a second for Alistair's motion? Second by Ms. Christensen. Any discussion? All in favor of granting final approval subject to these conditions, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? One abstaining, 601 for final approval. Thank you for the presentation, Ken.
Thank you very much.
Item 7 on our agenda is discussion and possible action regarding other items of concern. Does anyone have any other items of concern to offer? Tim?
Planning Board schedule 2016 in your packets.
Okay.
Looking for consensus that the schedule is okay. We've tried to avoid all the holidays as much as we possibly could. And we have continued the tradition, at least for the last couple of years since I've been employed by the town, of only holding one meeting during the month of November, as that second meeting week typically falls under the week of Thanksgiving, so we've tried to avoid that in the past.
Thank you, Tim. The one thing that I noticed about the schedule for benefit of the discussion of the board is a meeting tentatively scheduled for July 5th, which is, obviously right after the holiday. July 4th isn't necessarily a travel holiday, so I don't know what people think of that, but it is an area where we've tried to stay a little further away than that. Obviously, Tuesdays fall when they fall. So, but I was reminded by staff as a part of the discussion of this that it being on a tentative schedule here doesn't mean that we have agenda items that would actually hold a meeting. If
It's always the
it wasn't.
prerogative of the chair of the board to call the meetings whenever he sees appropriate.
In my employment, that week was considered a dead week.
I think
I
it
could
probably
never
would be.
contact anybody because they were all out. It was just a waste of time.
I think it probably would be as well, and it may be for the applicants as well. I think that people would come forward, and then their engineers and consultants would ask for continuances so that they could come at a different time.
I could certainly
Not
eliminate
conflict.
that from the schedule for purposes of publishing for now. But again, if we have the desire and the demand for it, it's always something the chairman could reinstate pending discussion with the remaining board members.
If we publish a schedule that says there's a meeting and there's an application deadline, that leaves an applicant the opportunity to come forward and sort of insist that they be put on that agenda, or not insist, but at least lobby for that.
I'm perfectly fine eliminating the July 5th meeting. There's a reason why I bring these in front of you.
I get it. Summertime is usually more busy for us than some of these other times of the year, and I don't know whether it's worth thinking of a different date around that time, although
Yeah,
there's a
the
meeting.
schedule is always made, and I've made a very conscious effort, as Lynn can appreciate, to try to minimize conflicting deadline and meeting schedules with the zoning board so that I don't have double packet and double meeting weeks, which are an incredible stress both on the staff and the applicants in order for us to get all the work done associated with those types of weeks. So I've paid very close attention to trying to minimize those conflicts as much as possible. Moving that meeting to a different week is either going to leave us with a double meeting week or a period of 3 straight weeks where my staff will be in nothing but deadline mode because of the scheduling of the meetings.
And I think it also would put us to the point where we would hold 2 meetings in back-to-back weeks in June, or 2 weeks
Well,
in
unless you
back-to-back
moved
in
it to
July.
the 12th and the 26th.
That's where it
And then
runs
you'd
into
be
the
on
zoning
That's
board
what you
issue.
don't
Yeah.
want. I've
And then
worked
you'd be
that
on to
out.
August 2nd. Let's just cross that one off, Tim. Chairman's prerogative. We'll just, if there happens to be some crisis, we'll
Sure, we can-
reevaluate as it gets closer. I haven't looked to see if any of these other dates happen to hit any holidays. I don't know if anybody sort of
We
has
have.
a sense of
We
things.
have, there are.
You've got it all
They
sorted
don't
out.
clash with any holidays. Jim.
All right. With that, does anyone have any objection to moving ahead with this schedule? Seeing no objection. Any other items of concern, Tim?
I do not.
Any other items of concern by any other members of the board?
One question for Tim. Having been on the panel board, on the board here for past 2.5 months and watched all this paper that you send to us every week, any thought given to sending it electronically and just put the drawings in mail?
That is really a preference of the board. I, frankly, when I started here 4+ years ago, I left a community where I had gone to completely paperless planning board packets and paperless meetings. So this is an adjustment for me to go back to this style. The advantage that Londonderry has that we don't have here is that at each of your seats, if you were in Londonderry, you'd have a computer terminal where you could basically scroll through everything as well as the items that were on the screens. We have the ability, if you bring a laptop, to plug in and connect here.
Yes.
But in lieu of that, the prerogative or the direction I've continued to receive over the course of my time here is to continue with paper packets until we're a little better equipped to handle that type of meeting environment.
I know that when I first started being the chair, we had a little bit of a discussion on this and decided that it wasn't the right time. And I like and appreciate Jeff's sort of bringing it back to the forefront to see where we're at with things. I certainly think that memos and the printed documents, other than plans, are easy enough to go and look up online. The plans I could even do online as long as you're making the applicants submit them in the proper PDF format so that you can zoom in. Not something that's scanned on a photocopier, but the original.
Correct, and that's what I had done in Londonderry. We transformed the application process to an electronic process entirely with specific requirements for the plans as well as other information.
And from an applicant standpoint, if they're submitting the full-sized plans and enough copies for all of us, there's good good chunk of expense that they're spending to make that happen as well.
We've been requiring 7 full-size sets, not necessarily for the board, but for all the different departments that review. We've been requesting and receiving the reduced size 11 by 17 copies for the board members yourselves.
Is there anybody on the board who's against this idea?
Yep.
Okay.
I have to admit I'm a bit of a dinosaur. I personally find it very difficult to read memos, documents, minutes, or anything else off a computer screen. I mean, if you do it, I'm not going to complain, but what I will do is, of course, print the damn things out. I cannot, I don't know what it is about me, but I have a real problem.
And I think it's important for you to have something in front of you when you're sitting here at the meeting.
That's my point. Now, I mean, if you do it electronically, I've no problem, as long as somebody gives me, a block of paper every month. No, I'm serious. I really am. I cannot read a computer screen, and I mean, even if you put it here in front of me now, I wouldn't be confident that I could work through it. I'm old. I'm a dinosaur. I'm sorry.
There's no reason to. For my benefit, what I do with this package is I kind of drag it around with me from the time I get it until the time I get here, and at some point I find some minutes between something else to open it up and take a look at it. And I would have to adjust to doing it on a computer where you're going to a place and sitting down and setting aside a time where you're going to look at it. But if that was something that we were technologically capable of doing, I'd figure out a way to make that adjustment. But I do think that some of the features, even if I'm bringing my own iPad or something, to be able to sit here in the meeting with it and do it live, because doing it without at least a screen in front of me showing me what it is I'm looking at doesn't work too well. I don't know.
If I may.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Last year or the year before, the council attempted to do that. And we acquired refurbished laptops that had plenty of power to do what we needed to do for the budget process. And we were using it primarily for the budget process. Because then we could go through and calculate and make changes in calculations based on different criteria that we might be dealing with. Like my colleague, Mr. Milnes, I eschewed the laptop because I can't read off a screen. It drives me crazy. Okay, I find it very difficult to do that. I'm used to having paper in front of me. It's just, it's just the way I am. That's the way it is. So I demurred and told him, just give me the hard copy and let me worry about dragging around a 4-inch binder. Okay, with the hard copy in it, I'll work off the hard copy. And most of the rest of the counselors did use the laptops for that. So technologically, we have the stuff we need to do that. And with the budget cycle coming up, I don't know whether you do, but in some respects, it's something that can be done. But if you want to do it, now's the time to think about it, because you're making budget submissions at this point in time for next year. Okay?
If we have the laptops already, is there any reason why they couldn't be put up at the table here so that we would have access to them as well?
Well, surely you take those laptops home. I mean, as council members,
gotta
they
be
will
able to
take them
take it
home.
home.
You'd need a
Yeah.
completely separate set of hardware.
Yeah. We'd have to be
Raise
able
all
to take
kinds
them
of-
home and look at them before the
Would
meeting.
raise all
No,
kinds
okay,
of.
you look at them on your own, or on
Yeah.
your own desktop.
But
But
yeah,
sitting here, if we had one here, then you could access them easily without
yeah,
having
but
to
you'd
drag
have
them around.
information on the computer. Unless you're going to start partitioning it with passwords and everything else, there would be information that the council might not want us to see. Sitting, if we use the same.
No, that's easily doable.
Potentially so. I know that.
And there are far more of you than there are councils.
Well, we don't each
No.
people.
I don't know that we're going to iron out all the details with this, but I appreciate having the suggestion to kind of move
I
this
would
along.
suggest that if this is something the board wants to pursue, we consider discussing this over a longer period of time so that we're not crunched by the existing budget schedule. So that if it is something the board wants me to pursue, it's something I can take into consideration and count for in my fiscal 18 budget instead of the fiscal 17 budget.
Absolutely, I am in favor of giving you the flexibility to look at your budget, but I would also ask if the staff or any of the board members have time to do it on their own and are interested, whether some of the, the lesser expensive technology like the Microsoft Surfaces that are $100 each, has that got enough oomph to receive the stuff and allow us to sit here?
But what I did, the only two things I needed in Londonderry were Acrobat Reader and PowerPoint, because that's ultimately the only two things that were utilized during the meetings. All the packets and plans and information were in PDFs, and I basically scrolled through PowerPoint for a variety of other items. And there was a way to, there was two things that happened. During the times where the board members had their own, used the PDFs, they were controlling the computers. When it was into presentations and whatnot, essentially there was a VNS service where what was happening on my laptop was happening on everybody's screens, and there was no control for the individual members.
When you, from a staff standpoint, is there any benefit to you at all in preparing a lesser number of packets, or once you're doing a packet, it's all the damn same?
It's just a matter of paper and time is all it is with the paper packets.
So it wouldn't do you any good if you cut it down to doing it for 3 people instead of doing it for the 9 of us?
Because as it is, we're still making extra copies anyway, usually for Zyna, a couple extras in case there are members of the public who want to have access to things. So we still generally make 15 copies of the packet each meeting.
So if it's not an all or nothing switch, it really doesn't do you any good from your department standpoint. It might save a little bit of paper and some trees. But
it's not a significant difference.
Okay.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I'm more happy if everybody wants to go that way, I'll go that way. As long as everybody knows, I'm going to print the damn thing out, so I bring it to me.
Well, I don't know if we're there
That's
yet.
fine.
I don't know if we're there yet. Desiree.
Just with the thought of doing with the technology, when you start looking at your phone or your little Surface, your little thing, you're making less contact with the applicant, and it affects the experience and the welcomeness of working with them. So, like, as an example, I have a friend who was doing interview process, and the school district she works for decided we're going to go all online. You have to type it up right then. You got 3 minutes to do it. You can't engage with the applicant at that point. Like, you say something, and you're trying to type it in while they're answering you. And, like, in this case, we're not typing it in, but it's that same thing. You've got something you're playing with, especially if you're doing it, say, on your phone, because I say, well, maybe I can just do it on my phone. It's a big enough phone. For anybody out there, it looks like I might be texting and not paying attention. I might as well be, like, crocheting or, like,
Well, that last little bit of comment I think is important. I have noticed that, and I have been to Londonderry as it would happen, and it looks like they're busy doing some stuff, and giving them all the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure they're looking at the application, but you can't tell that from the other side of the counter.
I can tell you there was a certain Yankee fan who was on that board who was always checking baseball scores during the meeting.
If you were here tonight, he would be doing it also.
Of course he would be tonight. Surely, hell he would.
I mean, frankly, I don't do that very often, but I've checked scores in the middle of our meetings.
You want a motion on minutes?
Ask one question. Sure. Tim, is it more work to provide both?
You've not got to talk into microphones. You have to talk.
Is it more, I have to get used to this. Is it more work to provide both?
If the applicants are providing it in the correct format, it's actually less work for the electronic packets.
Then it sounds to me like it might be a good step to go.
The trick still that for me is, and the reason I'm not quite ready to make that step is the accessibility here for having electronic materials or requiring you on your dime to start printing things. It's not something that I think we should be doing at this stage.
Well, while we're doing the paper applications, do we have the requirements in our own regulations and application requirements that the applicants are submitting electronic stuff, or do we need to make changes to what we're...
We would need to make specific changes to the regulations to do that.
So why don't we take a look the next time we look at our own regulations about making those things, and then we can do both systems at the same time for a while and see how it works, since it would be just forwarding the electronic stuff you got from the applicant. And then we would all get a paper copy to do with as we pleased, and then we'd all be able to judge whether we're using one or the other more than... Is that what you're getting at?
Absolutely. I mean, but I will say that I agree with Desiree 100%. If you're looking at a screen, you have too many things going on looking this way, trying to see what's in front of you.
to actually really be paying attention to it.
You gotta get closer to your microphone again. You wandered away. I think that you're right. And actually, Ken Clinton was a good example of it today. He was really struggling to find whatever he was looking for on the computer at the same time I was trying to work with him on some questions. So, a pretty fair example of it. But I don't know what that's. I mean, sooner or later, the world's going to overtake us. We're going electronic at some point in the future. It's just a matter of whether it's short-term future or some further distance.
Like I said, I think it's certainly something I would eventually like to get to, but I want to make sure that we have the facilities and the equipment needed to make that full-bore switch before we go and half-heart it.
Tim, one other question. Is there any restrictions on emailing that information to us?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
It's a public document. As soon as I hand it over.
Just a thought, you might consider phasing it in. For instance, do it with the plans, do it with the PDFs, and keep the memos on paper for a while. Get us used to it, as opposed to.
I was agreeable with that.
What?
I would go the other way. I'd want the plans on paper.
You're not turned on.
Well, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
You're not turned on either.
Phasing is what I was thinking of, and doing it gradually might be a way to.
I think this is actually worthy of an actual agenda item at some future meeting to discuss it much more fully, rather than at 9:10 on a week before I go on vacation.
Come on, we can keep this meeting going a little longer, Tim. I think that you're right, Tim, but I also think that perhaps our annual meeting where we look at our own procedures and processes may be a good time to take a look at that.
I'll make note of that.
Although that's a little ways away. I also concur with what Nelson's saying in terms of transitioning into it, and I think Vincent's suggestion of having them both available where you could experiment with it as a board member is not a bad way to go. With that, are there other... sorry, Tom?
Just one last thing. See, we also got a thumb drive with all the budget materials on it, too, so it was our choice whether we bought our own machine or not. Okay. But it just drove me crazy to read the screen.
I could see that with a budget and a 4-inch thick stack of stuff, but an application that's got a staff memo, a couple of pieces of paper, and a plan, at least for me, is a little bit different than doing a spreadsheet of the town's budget for however many millions it is.
I'm just going to chime in one more thing. I like the plans on the laptop or on the iPad because I have a tough time seeing the small plans that you have in front of you are very difficult. At least when you can blow them up and look at them closely, it does make it a lot easier. So I think there's a benefit to using both right now.
I agree with that. I've done that with PDFs of plans if they're submitted properly. If it's a scan, it's garbage. But if it's submitted properly, you can zoom in a lot and read whatever those words are that you can't read off the plan, and it says, barn to be, and nothing. You can go take a look and see what that actually meant to say. Anyway, with that, enough with the dead horse. Are there other items of concern the board wishes to discuss? Seeing none, let's take up our minutes of September 15th.
I move we approve as printed.
A motion to approve as printed. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Tom. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 502 with 2 abstentions. Mr. Russo and Ms. Fault abstaining. With that, we are at the moment of adjournment.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councillor Mahan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Not going to abstain on that one? What's your vote? 7-0-0. We are adjourned. Don't forget to turn your microphones off, and thank you, everyone.